Now we'll move to Dr. Marcus Powell, the LMIS Senior Key Expert, EU-TVET Egypt Program. Dr. Marcus, from your experience, as I understood that you have more than 30 years as a professional experience. That's okay. كلم العربي
Okay, thank you.
With more than 30 years as a professional experience, you already have a long really achievement in the labor market. I would like to hear from you, or to present for us actually the best practice in such LMIS programs. Please, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much for that nice introduction. Also, thank you for inviting me this afternoon. I've worked in the field of labour market for about 30 years. I worked in LMIS for about 10 years. I got very frustrated with labour market information systems. I could work in one country, nothing would ever happen. Lots of money would be spent, lots of ideas. Nothing would be sustainable. So I stopped working in LMIS and I went to work in policy and strategy. And I went to develop policy and strategy for the next 10 years. And one of the things I found was that most policies, most strategies are developed without using any information. So if you go to most countries, you'll see that they'll have information systems. You'll see that they have a planning and strategy process. The two never talk to each other. And I was fortunate a couple of years ago to return to LMIS after working in planning. So I got a new perspective on what's needed to make a labour market information system sustainable. So some of my suggestions, some of my recommendations are based on personal experience. It's not that difficult to develop a labour market information system. We need to answer 3 basic questions. The first question, and perhaps the most important one, is what is the purpose of a labour market information system? What do we expect it to do? I bet if I asked everybody in this room, they'd have a different answer. And this is part of the problem. Labour market information systems are expected to do so much. They're expected to do everything. They're expected to understand new trends. They're expected to forecast. They're expected to provide information on standards. They're expected to help us with planning. The list goes on and on and on and on. And what happens is, because it's so long, the labour market information system can never fulfill any of these functions, and it's never sustainable. So the first issue is we need to define precisely what the labour market information system will be doing. I don't mean managing supply and demand. I don't mean producing analytical information. I mean we need to be very specific about what is it going to do. Because if we're not, we lose our way. And if we lose our way, it's not sustainable. So we need to define precisely what is the labour market information system to do. And it seems to me that there are 3 main different functions, or you can group them as functions. You've got the first one, which I call strategic and analytical. And here it is concerned with supporting research and the policy process. That's the first one. The second one is more operational, and it's more concerned with issues to do with platforms, employment services, matching, very much operational. And then the third one is administrative, where we're talking about how LMIS can provide information about where people can study, information about occupational standards, information about courses, etc. Very much administrative. So if we think of LMIS in terms of those categories, that can help us define what is it supposed to do. and then we don't lose our way. For myself, I personally think that the emphasis should be on planning. It should be supporting strategic and helping us develop employment and skills planning. And in doing so, there needs to be a close synergy between the information produced and the planning process. And over the last 2 years, because of COVID, we've seen employment planning taking a new agenda. In my country, I'm from the UK, we're now seeing the UK government, the cabinet, giving as much emphasis to employment as to inflation. So you're seeing ministries of finance becoming concerned with the employment agenda when this was never so. And in doing so, they obviously need information. So a lot of it should be about strategic information, how we can support strategy. So that's the first question. We need to define what is the LMIS going to be doing. Okay, that's the first question. The second, what is the architecture? What is the structure? When we build a house, we need to develop our architecture in order to understand what is it going to look like. Well, we need to do that with an LMIS. And the architecture consists of two issues. One consists of structures. What are the structures involved in labour market information? Obviously, one body can't collect all the information. It's going to involve lots of different organisations. So we need to set up our management and governance structures. We need to set up and oversee it with a strategic body. And then we need to have a secretariat that can fulfill the role of collecting and overseeing this process. So beside the institutional structure, there's the processes. And the processes refer to the inputs, the management, and the utilization. And all these need to be mapped out for our different indicators on the labour market, responsibilities assigned, and agreements made. If we can do that, we can build our labour market information system. If we can't, we will lose our way. So have a think about those issues. What is the purpose? What is the function? What is the structure? And what is the process is going to be? And what I'd like to say is that each country has a different approach to doing that, which will be determined by their cultures, their institutional structures, and their history. So, for example, I'm from the UK. You tend to find very much in Anglo-Saxon economies, the emphasis is on free markets. There's an assumption that if people have information, they can make their own decisions and markets clear. So in the UK, a lot of emphasis is going on to producing knowledge, producing information, and disseminating it to individuals, providers, to employers, so they can make their own decisions. And it's very much a free market-based approach, with the emphasis being on that labour market information is used at the individual level to make decisions. In some countries, that will not work, simply because markets are imperfect, there's not enough information, people don't know how to use that information, and suppliers and consumers can't act in the way that markets are meant to work. Okay, so that's in the UK. If we look at continental Europe, a lot of the emphasis is more on social partnerships, how information can be used to support agreements, bargaining, whether it's at the plant level, whether it's the sector level, whether it's about skills, pay and conditions. And here, labour market information is being used to influence more employment outputs, with social partners playing a role in this process. If we jump over to Asia, to some of the tiger economies, there you see a much more developmental state model for labour market information, where the country defines their economic priorities, or trade and investment strategies are linked to these priorities. This feeds in to the education and training in terms of numbers to be trained, types of qualification, where the priority is given. Very much a top-down driven based approach, which also depends on labour market information. So what I'm getting at here is it needs to be embedded in your institutions, in your structures. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So I think I've talked long enough. Thank you.